there is a good thing to be the last to speak. It means everything has been said already. Then I will not have to think too much. But the disadvantage is everybody is tired. So I will have to concentrate more on the choice of my words and know how to make the message heard and understood. Yes. When I was taking my flight in Amsterdam, sometimes in January 2012, going to New York as senior legal advisor, I didn't know at all, no idea of what I will be seeing there. Then January, few days over, February, Togo, my country, was becoming the president of the Security Council. Then we had to prepare the provisional program which has been shown at the beginning. That is where I started having a small idea of what it will be. Then I find myself in the middle of many, many crises and thinking already that it will be upon me to be preparing legal advice on all those questions, some of which do not have anything to do with my continent even. Then, what shall I do? That is a situation where you deal with what comes to you. You try to forget what you have learned in school or at the university because there is no theory there. The first speaker was mentioning two words which I will be focused on. I am not seeing my slide. Is don't try to understand it. So the first point, the first word which is somewhere there in the middle is the legality of military interventions. And the second one will be the legitimacy of military interventions. I will already give some thought to what Niels said before as advice that the mandate of a mission or the peacekeeping mission should be clearly defined for those who will be in field. That is true. Then what I will be doing this evening is I will be taking some examples of the difficult cases which we faced when we were in the Security Council 2012 and 13, meaning Mali, Syria, Afghanistan, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Central African Republic, and many others. So to come to the legality of a decision as to whether there should be a military intervention or not, let me tell you quickly that no one is against military intervention, but at the same time, no one is for it. Am I right? Or am I right? No one is against, no one is for it, because whatever you do, you can always find legal justifications in international law to back your military intervention. And we have been finding many which are not even used, and you don't need to use all before you justify the legality of military intervention. So the first point will be, where do you find the proper legal expertise to back military intervention? They are not that far. They are in the UN Charter. You find them mainly in Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. So Chapter 7, everyone is talking about it, but no one knows really what the content is. So I will not go into it now. I will just be taking some provisions from it and illustrate what I was saying and also link it with a specific case which I saw. First, when we went to the case of Mali, the question was whether any intervention there will be legal or not. And the previous speaker was asking the question, why calling that mission a terror mission? There was a reason for that. Then it is where the issue arose in Mali. The ECOWAS, which is the sub-regional organization, has already prepared a response to the situation, but in a preventative way, not to wait until the war starts before. But the tricky issue in the UN Charter is that no sub-regional or regional organization is allowed to conduct such an intervention without the approval of the Security Council. Then, ECOWAS was ready, but we were not allowed to move. We have to wait for the approval of the Security Council, but the issue of legitimacy arose. Who will take the lead to accept that that military intervention takes place? That is that in discussion we were when the war started. Then all measures which ECOWAS put in place to prevent the crisis were out of date. But now, what to do? When we made the evaluation at that time for countries which can go for that military intervention, there were not so many. Okay. I will not mention all of them then, but we came to the conclusion that countries which were available do not know the field because it is in a desert, and only African countries at the Atlantic were available, but they don't know there. Then we will have sent them, it will have been, I don't know, we say it in French, carnage, because they don't know the field, they will get lost and they will be slaughtered. Then now, we came to the conclusion to have two different approaches. One is to have a normal military intervention, and the second one to have against terrorist issues. But at that time, the idea was already established where the terrorist issue is coming from and what response should be given to that. That is where we put it upon one country or each country which feels itself well equipped to respond to that threat, to go also for the terrorist aspect, and those countries which do not feel well equipped to do that, not to run into it. My own country was the first one to be deployed there, but we didn't also go to field. We sent only military doctors because we don't know the field and send our people there to be slaughtered. Then, the questions as to whether a peacekeeping mission can quickly change into military intervention was known long time ago. For the first time when the UN sent peacekeeping mission in 1962 in Congo, we saw that it's not easy always to keep a mission as being peacekeeping. It comes a time where it becomes part of the conflict. Then, through that experience in 62 and other experiences, meaning in 81, when the African Union for the first time also sent peacekeeping troops to Chad at the time of the Civil War, we saw also what the limits of peacekeeping missions are if they are not allowed to involve in military action. Then came another very crucial issue. It was in Liberia in 90, where based on the experience in 81 by the African Union, the ECOWAS, the sub-regional West African Economic Community, decided also to send peacekeeping mission to Liberia to stop the war, but at that time, clearly with a mandate also to intervene. So that was the first time in the history that a sub-regional community is sending peacekeeping mission to a country to intervene militarily, not only for peacekeeping. Then, what happened, and that will be my first advice to Peter, since it is allowed to call him like that, unless I am not, is how to involve seriously and genuinely the sub-regional and regional institutions in the organization of military interventions. The legal issue is not necessary. It is the legitimacy which is important and which is subject to the extent to which the countries in the region are involved in that. And it's not an issue of choosing some countries in the region which will support already a position which is adopted by some foreign or far-staying countries, to involve them genuinely. You will see how the ECOWAS involvement in the Mali mission has also prevented that slaughtering which would have happened if any country was sent there without knowing the field. Then, and here I'm going to make a statement which I don't have any intent to offend anyone here. Because it is difficult to pass through Chapter 7 and have military intervention, some countries have had the idea to bypass Chapter 7 and make it possible to intervene. That is how responsibility to protect came into discussion. Chapter 7 is clear and does not need any other playing around it, but it is strict, and anyone who wants to use Chapter 7 needs to think a lot. Then, responsibility to protect. It is a good word or good expression, but that is the statement. That is an idea which was generated from Africa. But when it is taken from Africa and westernized, it went too far from the objective. What happened? After 81, the missed success in Chad pushed African countries to think in a different way, which means we have to be solidar to each other, because if the house of the neighbor is burning, it can also come to us. That is where, already based on the example of 90 in Liberia, in 2000, African countries have already moved from the principle of non-interference to the principle of non-indifference, meaning it is not an interference in the business of the other country, but it is not to remain indifferent of something which is happening in that country. One of the big differences, when Koffi Afande took the idea and brought it to the UN to be conceptualized, they missed the most important part of that, which will make R2P not inapplicable or make it applied as it was in Libya. I explain. When Africa decides to have that principle of non-indifference with the possibility of the sub-regional institution to intervene in a specific country, it went through an agreement. Countries should first agree among each other that within our community, anything which will happen in one country can be dealt with by the institution. That one is not in the R2P. Only the declaration in 2005 is not an agreement, a binding agreement to countries. Then if you accept already that crisis on your own territory can be dealt with by the sub-regional organization, then you are bound by it. You cannot escape it. And it can be done by force. And that is what happened in the Gambia when the president, the one who lost the election, did not want to leave power. The Gambia is part of that agreement, that when there is a constitutional seizure or maintenance of power, the ECOWAS can come and remove the person who has lost. That is what has been done. And you will see that's the first time also in the history that ECOWAS moved the forces before requesting for the approval of the Security Council, and the Security Council was forced to approve it and did not take a resolution, but took what we call a PRST, meaning presidential statement, which is the first time that military intervention was being done under a PRST and not a resolution, because it was already in field. Again, the issue of to what extent the regional organization should be involved. And like I said, not to choose some 2-3 countries to back a position which is not necessarily in the interest of the region. Where does that issue come from? To take the principle of non-indifference from Africa, turn it into responsibility to protect, removing even the main essence from it, and wanting now to impose it to everyone. Where does it come from? That is something which we, and maybe some of you, have already noticed a long time ago, which we called cultural cleansing, which is going on around the world, which has started a long time ago, whereby it is like there is a kind of idea to deny that Africa has participated in anything positively. Then, anything which is taken from there has to be westernized and brought back as if that was the genuine idea, but sometimes with mistakes. Intervening in Libya should have involved the African Union, but it was not done because countries which were behind that intervention, they were coming not to help the Libyan population. They were coming to resolve their own problems, their own fears, like the previous speaker said it, but leave behind the problem for the Libyans themselves to resolve it, knowing that their intervention will make the situation more complicated for them to resolve it. We will see today that there are more victims in Libya than before the intervention. Where does that come from? Am I out of time? 1 minute. Okay. And that cultural cleansing, which I am talking about, is a serious issue that the next generation should work on, being genuine and looking at things as where they come from and what are the essence which will help the humanity. And that has not started today. A former president of France came to Africa to say that Africa's problem is that we have not yet entered into history. Another one, Sarkozy. And Mr. Macron also came to say that our problem is a civilization problem. But before them, many other people started that, like the great philosophers. You take Montesquieu, you take Kant, you take Hegel, go and read their books and say what they are saying about Africa and how it started, because it is those philosophers which you are learning in school and the university and shaping your mind and directing you in the wrong way. So please, then, second advice, which will be my conclusion, in addition to involvement of sub-regional organizations. How is the military intervention implemented? One thing is to involve the regional institutions into the decision-making. But now, for the implementation, how is it done? There again, it should be done primarily by the sub-regional organizations, unless themselves they call for help from anyone else. Otherwise, no military intervention can be useful to any region if the decision-making process does not involve genuinely the region, and also the implementation is also not left in the hands of the region unless that region calls for assistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afande. Thank you very much for your advice and for giving us your perspective. Our perspective being probably mainly westernized and Western dominated. I suggest, since we're running a bit out of time, that we go directly to the audience with your permission for questions. Is there anyone who has a question for Mr. Afande? Judge Afande, yes, right in the middle. Okay, we're going to try this. 2 women throwing balls. This is going to be dangerous. Yes, okay, well,
thank you.
There we go.
All right, my name is Simone Scholte and I'm a student of International Relations and Organizations. And I have a question, which philosophers do you recommend us to read?
I heard quite a lot already. Hegel was mentioned, I guess.
Yes, but those were sending us in the wrong direction, so which ones should we be reading?
It was a joke. Which one is in the right direction?
I am not sure.
Which philosophers would you recommend that would be interesting to read, being a student?
Oh!
Since it's not, obviously
no,
not
you can
Hegel.
continue reading them as an example of what should not be followed.
Okay, but we need names, some names.
But those to be read, there are also many. You will see, for example, the Senegalese Cheikh Anta Diop, who is translated also in English. You will see historical like Elike Mbokoro. You will see Professor Lumumba from Kenya. You will see many scholars who have already worked on that issue, who wrote a lot of documents, and it is not only on politics, it's on spirituality, philosophy, medicine, mathematics, and you will see how far African can contribute also to the move in a more human way than what we are seeing now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I can send you another list if you...
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, we're going to organize a list for anyone who's in... Oh, gosh, that was the director of Klingendaal, but she's still alive. Who has a question for Mr. Afande? Anyone who wants to read, who wants to... Yes, we have a question in the front here. Andere kant, yeah.
Suggestion for the philosophers. What about Mandela? You wrote a lot of books as
Mandela.
well.
Het wordt een leesclub, dames en heren. Anyone with a final question? Yes, up in the air. I'm running towards you. And then, Mr. Afande, I'm going to close the conversation. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. The question I have is, I heard very clearly your plea for regional solutions to regional problems. But what if those solutions don't arise, or if these processes take so long that suffering continues for such a long time, and that perhaps we have to conclude regional solutions do not work, we have to go back to a more global response, or maybe back to the responsibility to protect. Is that still a possibility, or do you have another way?
Thank you for the question. You know, the question was if peace can be manufactured. So, if you say regional solutions are taking too long, what is the time average to build peace? The velocity of some people, the precipitation of which some want to resolve the issue and create peace in some situations is rather the problem. When at a regional level, solution is not being found, it is not that there is none to be found. That is where diplomacy should go into play. When I take again one example, Guinea-Bissau. When we were in the Security Council, Guinea-Bissau was not one of the burning issues in Africa. Then the months before, when we did what we call horizon scanning, I think you should be familiar with that, meaning to look further and see what could be possible situations to fall into the basket of the Security Council. We already identified Guinea-Bissau as being one of the possible cases. And from that point already, we, as a representative of that region in the Security Council, we have already started working on solutions. Then, having time is also how fast you identify the issue. Mainly, problems which are not resolved until now are problems which are not identified as quickly as possible, or which are identified but the measures are not taken. I gave already the example of Mali, where ECOWAS was already there, but could not work because other interests in the Security Council prevented from that. And that is what ECOWAS wanted to avoid, and we had a quick solution in the Gambia, where the former president has been removed. Then it is always potential to have a quick answer at the regional level than to have it at the universal level where many other interests are in play.
Thank you very much. Mr. Afande, thank you very much for your advice and for being here tonight with us. I'm sorry, but we really have to close.
I was expecting someone to ask a question on quickly what we call responsibility while protecting, meaning when troops are sent to fields, they also commit crimes, but they are never or they are rarely kept accountable for that. Then what are the principles in the future to hold these people accountable, whether through their own country or the institution which are sending them, meaning responsibility to protect cannot go without the responsibility while protecting.